base sizes. The little deep socket that goes over this one, for example, is a 5/8 of an inch. This is probably the most common size. Some of the older vehicles used a 3/4 size socket, deep socket that went over. And there's also in some generator or maybe some old vehicle applications even at 13/16. So you can see the wrench needed to remove the different spark plugs. Originally they came out with the copper spark plug that was serviced about every 60,000 miles, and the little electrodes on these copper pieces would wear in the middle. This copper core here would eventually melt away, and then we'd have to replace the spark plug. But this is an inside view of what the spark plug looks like. We've kind of progressed over time to different types of metal cores, from copper to platinum and even iridium type spark plugs, where the spark plugs can last longer, gives a more efficient spark over time. So some of the things I want to point out here is, if you are changing your spark plug and say you remove this from your vehicle and the replacement plug is this, you can see the reach. This is what they refer to as a reach. The threads are smaller here and these are longer, and so you have to be careful, because if you put this inside of your cylinder, it could hit the piston. So try to find the same reach spark plug based upon how long these threads are, because you can see some spark plugs have different reach sizes. So be aware of that when you are replacing them. Compare the diameter of the threads, compare the depth of the spark plug as it's being installed. So these all have electrodes that can be gapped with a gap gauge, like we showed you. And this one cannot be gapped because it has two lines. You can see the electrode will bounce from here to here and here to here. And so this is a two-prong type system, which some manufacturers recommend this type of plug. Bosch came out with a 4 type, and they say it's better efficiency, better spark, so it kind of ignites whichever one is closest. And these we cannot gap, so they just simply install. There's no gap setting like this one. It has a gap between the electrode on the base and then that copper or platinum or iridium tip in between. These are all ceramic insulated. Make sure that the ceramic isn't cracked or broken, because if you have spark go through this, it will shoot out the side. So also visually inspect and make sure these porcelain pieces are not cracked or broken. This particular plug, you can see it does not have a base at all, and it goes from the cord directly over, so that would be the spark. Some marine application engines, watercraft, will have no electrode on the side here. So depending upon the type of vehicle you're working on, could have a variety of different grounds for those gaps. And again, pay attention to the reach, the threads, all that. This is actually a spacer that if we have some issues, some people will put a spacer in there, and then the spark plug will thread into the spacer. And so this just gives you some added clearance if you're dealing with high compression engines. That spacer, so it doesn't hit the piston head, some people will put these spacers, they're aftermarket applications that you would thread in where the spark plug is. And this is a glow plug, and so the glow plug, this is used not for spark but for diesel combustion, and this is going to get hot based upon electricity going in through here. This is grounded to the block, and then this gets hot to create combustion. And then here are some applications with ID of what kind of happened inside of the cylinder with maybe improper combustion, could be coolant, could be oil, could be fuel problems. These are all applicable, and you can look at the charts. You can see some visual examples here of what's happened. And if you want to test the spark plug, we have this tester. This one's iridium. This one is a copper core. You can see the tips are slightly different on the inside, and you can see the combustion with the spark. You can kind of zoom in there and see where it's a blue spark. A blue spark is a healthy spark. If I have a red spark, that's a weak spark. So we want to have a blue spark for most cases to combust with the air-fuel mixture. Okay. This particular gap gauge uses a wire, and the wire is slid between the inner core and also the outside electrode ground. So we can check the gap setting, use this wire gauge, and to increase the gap, we just pry it apart with this little piece on the side of the wire gap gauge tool. This type of gap gauge is circular, and it's tapered. And it's tapered small, and then you can rotate the spark plug around to get the right gap setting. If the gap is too large, you just push down the electrode of the spark plug on a table, for example, and then you can just rotate it around again to the gap setting you need. We also have this blade style that does the same thing, and on one side is in thousandths of an inch, and on the other side is millimeter size.